Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, you're here to hear from Ruth Robinson as she talks about her Great Allegheny Passage, GAP, and C&O Canal Towpath bike adventure. Pittsburgh to DC. Ruth Robinson has been a Rover for several years and is currently serving on the Rovers board as trips director. She is an avid hiker, backpacker, cross-country skier, canoeist, and cyclist. She says whenever she sees a trailhead, it beckons her to explore. So please welcome tonight's speaker, Ruth Robinson.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Same person here again. All right. So I am here to tell you about our trip that we took in May, but I'm also here to give you information in case you want to plan your own trip there. This bike tour was non-supported. We did it all ourselves. We did not camp, but we did have panniers, and we carried clothing, bedding, because we didn't need like a sleeping bag, snacks, and tools. And I'm not going to do kind of a daily journal of what we did every single day. Instead, I'm going to talk about various different topics. And at the end, and it's semi-chronological, but not a day-to-day journal. And I hope you are left with an impression that this was beautiful and also that you want to do it too. So here is the crew that we had. There were 5 of us. David and Julie had done the same trip, the same route in a few years back, and they really wanted to do it again. I started talking to them about that I wanted to do it, and they said they wanted to do it again. And they had some ideas about how they wanted to do it differently, including that they wanted to be able to see more along the way, because the first time, in order to get in all their miles, they didn't get to see everything. They had to keep going. So we decided to lower the mileage per day and go from there. So here we are at our very first breakfast. And anyway, we started talking about this trip and immediately had others that wanted to go. So we started a trip. And the first thing you need for a successful trip is a fantastic group of people. Like this one, you need a good attitude. You need them to be considerate of everyone's needs when you make group decisions. And we also made the rule that we had to stop anytime anybody wanted to. So if anyone wanted to stop and see anything, that's what we did. All right, so what was the plan? So this is nominally a route that is going from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. So let me see. So hit Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. So that's the whole route. It's 330 miles. And we drove to where we were going to start this trip, but we didn't start in Pittsburgh because of concerns about leaving our cars there, whether it's safe, whether it's too expensive. So instead, we started in Connellsville. All right. And so the overall plan was that we'd bike down to DC, and then you can take a train back. So this was the first town south of Pittsburgh that had a train stop where you could also have bikes. So that's where we started. And okay, and so there's 2 parts. There's the red part, and there's the blue part. So it's actually 2 different trails. The red is the Great Allegheny Passage, and the blue is the C&O Canal Towpath. So they kind of make one overall route, but they are not the same. And you notice that this route is not straight, okay? It's extremely curvy, and that's because almost all the time you're going along a river. So you're following rivers, and it's not always the same river, but you're almost always following a river. All right, and Also notice that around here, we get to the Eastern Continental Divide, which I'll talk about in a bit. And shortly after that, you get to the Mason-Dixon line. So we cross both of those. And then a short while after that, you end the Gap Trail and you start on the C&O. The yellow markers show the places we stayed or we were planning to stay each night. So this is the plan. This is not what we did. And so we were going to stay in all these places and end up in DC. Notice we had 3 lock houses on the list. I'll talk about those in a bit. So the Gap is a converted rail path. It was a railroad. But the C&O Canal Towpath is where they built a canal alongside the Potomac River. And the towpath is where the mules pulled the ships through the shipping lane. So the towpath operated from about 1831 to 1924, so about 93 years. And now then that got abandoned, was no longer a shipping lane, and now it's a trail that people can use for biking and walking and everything else. And it's operated by the National Park Service. All right, so here's the plan. But things don't always go as planned. You probably all know that. So we became members of this Facebook group, Great Allegheny Passage C&O Canal Enthusiasts, which was super useful because there were all kinds of updates on conditions and where to go and what to see and where to stay and all kinds of stuff. But about 2 days before we left, we started seeing, oh, there's 5 inches of rain and you should reschedule, and there's, you know, 4 detours on the path, and it's muddy, and you shouldn't go, and all this stuff. So, and then we started seeing pictures. So here's the trail. And here's the trail again. These were showing up on Facebook, and trees falling all over the trail, and inches of mud on the trail. So and here's one, you know, staircase that should not be underwater that is underwater. So we start seeing these and we're like, should we actually go? Turned out that most of the worst damage was on the lower half of the trail, the C&O trail, and we were going to start at the top. So we decided to go ahead and go, even though that like just happened. And we could always change our plans as we go. We would take it one day at a time. So that's what we decided to do. What we ended up doing was a slight modification of the original plan. When we got to the town of Paw Paw, instead of continuing on this section, we actually got a shuttle ride over to here and missed some of the worst of the trail on a day when they were expecting another inch of rain. So we decided to bypass all of that. But other than that, we did our plan. So we did miss Lock House 49, but we had a layover day in Harper's Ferry, which turned out to be kind of a nice thing too. All right, where is the mouse? Can't find it. There it is. All right, so here's the guy, his name is Dan, that shuttled us from did our modification. He had a nice big trailer and he knew a lot about the trail. And he actually took us over to our hotel first and dropped off our luggage and then drove us to that other spot where we wanted, because we wanted to see some historic, the historic battlefield of Antietam there. And he was a wealth of information, so that he was really nice to talk to. So anyway, what's the trail like in general? It's beautiful. It's, again, along rivers most of the time. Like here's typical, there's often a cliff on one side and usually a river on the other. Or in the case of the lower part, there's a river on one side and a canal on the other. But we did find lots of downed trees that we had to go under or over or around or through, depending on the tree. Somebody on the Facebook group had said there were 100 downed trees, which we think was an exaggeration, but we do know that a lot of them got cleared by the time we got down to the lower part. So we did not see 100, but we saw quite a few.
You got to use your boundary wire skills.
Yes, that's right. Portaging over trees. No. All right. On the first day of our ride, we actually had a very short ride on the trail because we wanted to go see this Frank Lloyd Wright house called Falling Water. That's a detour off the trail, and it was beautiful, as you might expect. There was lots of towering hemlock trees there, and we did hear from more than one of the people working there that it was maybe a dumb idea to build a house right over a creek. There would be ongoing water problems, and sure enough, that seemed to be the case because they were under construction because of some water issues. But anyway, it's a beautiful house, and we paid $20 to get access to the grounds, to walk the grounds, and for another $20 you could get a tour inside, but they were full and we didn't want to pay it, so we just walked around, but we did get to go on the terrace at one point as well. The ride to this, I would recommend you shuttle. We decided to bike it, and so you're down on a river, and the river is in a valley. Rivers make valleys, right? That's geology. So anytime you want to leave the river, you're basically going up very, very steeply. So it was a really steep climb out of the river valley to get there, and steep enough that we had to stop twice to catch our breath, and also like rushing traffic going by you and a shoulder that's maybe 2 inches wide. So it was not a fun ride. I don't recommend it, but we all survived it anyway. All right, so here's some more scenes from trails. Parts of the trail, you can see there's, some places are just really beautifully green. You can see how pretty it is with trees and water. It's just a gorgeous trail. The surface is crushed limestone, almost for the most part. The gap is in a little better shape than the C&O. In fact, historically, the C&O has always been quite a bit worse shape, but recently they put more crushed limestone on it. So it's actually a pretty good surface at this point. There's also occasional tunnels you get to go through. So here's some more tunnels. Lots of tunnels. This one was 0.6 miles long, and you needed a headlamp to get through it. And some of them were shorter, and some of them, they all have, some of them have lights. In fact, some of them even have motion activated lights. So as you go through the tunnel, it lights up for you. So that's nice. But the tunnels were a lot of fun. Yeah. So we finally got to the Eastern Continental Divide. That's where the water that we just come from goes into the Ohio River, which goes into the Mississippi, which goes into the Gulf of Mexico. The other side goes into the Chesapeake Bay and out to the Atlantic. So that's the divide. And that was the highest point for us. And so inside the tunnel, there was this really useful chart that also shows the whole route. So here's the whole 330 miles to DC. Here's the Great Allegheny Passage and the C&O Towpath parts. And so this is condensed. It was never steep, never looked steeper here than it was. It's very condensed. So, but our second day of riding was the one where we went from Ohiopyle here, 51 miles up to the top. So most of our day was going up, gradual, but still up. And then we stayed in Frostburg. So the last bit was a nice little ride down, but that was our hardest day going up that part. But the grade is only about 1%. I think the maximum 1.5 is the other side, the steep side. Most people go from this Pittsburgh to DC rather than the other way, mostly because of the steepness of this part, I believe. All right. So we did pass the Mason-Dixon line, and so it was the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania, and it also became kind of the symbolic border of the North versus the South. At this point on the trail, it actually is literally a line of bricks, and this is looking south, and then this is looking north with the same post there. But yeah, it's a literal line that we stopped. And of course we stopped and gawked at that because we stopped anywhere we wanted to and just took pictures and had fun. We were not in a hurry. We were never in a hurry, which made it quite fun. All right, here we are contemplating going into a tunnel. For some reason, I found this sign humorous. Do not enter tunnel with oncoming train. I don't know. Isn't that kind of obvious? But I don't know. Anyway, maybe not. We also at some point went by Great Falls, Maryland, which was probably a lot greater than usual because of all the flooding. There was a lot of water there, and this picture does not capture how amazing that place was. It was just gushing water, and huge waterfalls. So really beautiful. All right, and then eventually we got down to the C&O Trail. The C&O Trail. And we came across that. You may remember that from an earlier slide. Okay, there's this place where the water went right through the trail, and we had heard that we would have to detour. This was one of the 4 detours. We would have to go out to the highway and detour many miles around, or we were potentially going to get a ride. But anytime you do a detour, you're probably not on a very good biking road. So like detours were not fun. And you can't, like this is a canal on this side and like river on this side. So there's no dry land. You can't go around it. You have to go back to a road and go around it. And this is about 12 feet across. So you aren't going to jump it. But we got super lucky. Our timing was actually perfect because we had started, and then 5 days into it, they had just laid some sandbags on that gap, and we were able to go through by carrying our bikes. So we were some of the first people who got to actually go through that after the flooding had happened. So there's David carrying his bike across. All right, so I mentioned a lot of rivers. Here's many of the rivers we passed. Mostly it was these two in bold. Everyone's probably heard the Potomac, and we were quizzed by a waitress at one of our restaurants, like, can we pronounce the name of this other one? So if you don't already know the name, they don't want to guess how it's pronounced in the live audience. Good try. What's that? No. Anyway, people are trying.
Allegheny.
Audience. Oh, I hear a voice.
Allegheny.
Nope, not quite. Yakagani. Yakagani. So anyway, yeah, we had to learn to say that if we wanted to be on the trail. But we were on that one a lot, the Potomac a lot, and these other two a little bit. But like I said, they all carve river valleys. So anytime you wanted to go out, you would have to go up. And so this is actually the town of Frostburg, where there's a little zigzag going up the hill that's just for bikers. It's not a road. And here's Venky, and here's Luke, and over here's David and Julie. And it doesn't look like it's that steep from this angle, but this thing is way down the hill. This was actually a very steep climb up the hill, and the river's beyond that down here. And once you get to the top of that, you came to our lodging. And then when we wanted to go to dinner, you turn around and we have to go up this. And when you get up this, you still have a hill to climb to get to the actual restaurant. So, I mean, everything was just up, away from the river. All right. And so we're at this is the canal here, and this is a lock house. So there were locks. All right. This is a gate that actually closes. These are the two sides. They close here. And so this can be a lock. They can fill with water and let ships through. And this was a major shipping lane for those years back in the, what did I say, 1831 to something. But in order for when the ships get here, they need someone to open the locks. So they had these lock houses where people lived to operate the locks. And now, of course, they don't operate the locks. So they have these houses. Some of them have been refurbished and you can stay in them. And it's really fun. But this one was not. This is not a refurbished one. So some of them are still there that are not yet refurbished. And here we are contemplating who knows what.
You know how wide the lot is?
It's not real wide. Oh, yes, I need to repeat the question. Someone asked how wide is the lock? I'm guessing maybe David knows.
It's wider than the narrowboat canal trips. No, I think they were maybe 14 feet wide.
Yeah, I was thinking like something like that. 14 feet is what he's guessing. I'm thinking it was like 13, 14, somewhere in there. It's not real wide. The boats had to be pretty narrow. In fact, at one point we saw one on display and it was quite long and skinny, very long and skinny. So yeah, those are the canals. All right.
Some were pulled by mules or horses.
Yes, so that's what the trail was that we were biking, is the former trail. He asked about if they were pulled by mules or horses. That trail that we biked on was the trail that the mules walked on previously to pull them. Yeah, to pull the boats through. So yeah, pretty cool. We actually saw some mules at one point, not pulling boats, but they were anyway. Okay. So there were a lot of historic sites. One thing we saw on the way a lot was history, like the Mason-Dixon line and other stuff. But one stop we spent quite a bit of time at was Antietam National Battlefield. So Antietam, the Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest day in American history. And it was also considered a major turning point for the advantage of the North in the Civil War. And so we went to the visitor center. This was the day that we got shuttled. They dropped us near Antietam, and we went to the visitor center and saw movies about the battles. And then we went out to the field and biked all around the fields and saw where the battles happened. That was pretty cool. And then here we decided to take a picture of our wheels next to the cannon wheels just for fun. So that was a really fun and interesting day. And I just threw in this picture of coke ovens. Another historic thing that we saw, which is they were just carved into the hills, and the coke ovens are where they converted coal to coke, which is used in steel making. And don't ask me any more about it than that. All right, so remember that picture I showed of the floodwaters. It turns out, whoops, I'm not there yet. It turns out that this is the route you need to take to get up to the bridge to go over to Harper's Ferry. And so, well, seeing that was not pleasant. But then 6 days later, when we finally got to that bridge, guess what? We got to go up it. It wasn't flooded. So our timing was really quite amazing that we were able to do that, because you can't get from the trail to Harper's Ferry without going up this bridge. So you carry your bikes up. You can see a little bit more of it here. It curls around and you go up. And then you cross over the Potomac River and whoops. Cross over Potomac River, and then this is the bridge. We were on that other side, and this is the bridge you come across and you come to Harper's Ferry. So then we spent a layover day in Harper's Ferry, and that was a lot of fun. There's a lot to see and do there, so we were kind of happy to spend some time there. And so here's this climb we did up to a point. Harper's Ferry is the confluence of the Potomac, but also the Shenandoah River. And when you get up to the top, you can see the confluence a bit. And apparently Thomas Jefferson did that one point and said it was worth a trip across the Atlantic to see it, to see that view. The thing that Harper's Ferry is probably best known for is John Brown. And so he was the guy who tried to spark a slave revolution, and he came there and took over an arsenal in town and eventually had to retreat to this building where he was captured. And so that building is still there for us to see. And there was a museum and all kinds of fun stuff to see in town about him. All right, so in our group, there was not a night owl among us. However, we did go out one night to this place that was recommended to us by a restaurant owner called The Barn. And it was quite fun. It was a big room, and back in the back are some folk people playing like kind of a jam session of folk music. So that was kind of a fun vibe, and we did have one fun evening with that. All right, and then wildlife. We did see some wildlife. Some of these pictures are blurry, and I apologize for that. This black crowned night heron was fun to see. We also saw quite a few turtles. This is a snapping turtle covered with duckweed. There's another turtle here. Here's a whole row of turtles. Again, sorry, the picture's not great, but so here in Minnesota, we have Western painted turtles, but out east, they have Eastern painted turtles, and some of them get much, much bigger than ours. So some of them were really huge turtles. We also saw this snake, which apparently is a black rat snake, although I haven't been able to confirm that, but that's what I was told. Okay. Quite large, though. It took up a lot of the trail there. Okay, so lodging. There's a lot of choices for lodging. So we stayed in a variety of different lodging. One thing you can do that we didn't do is stay at these hiker-biker campsites. They are all on the C&O, and they are free to stay for one night. You can stay. So, and they're always on a river, like everything else. So they were actually quite nice looking. So if you want to camp, that's a really nice option. On the Gap Trail, there are also campsites, but they aren't, they're more private ones and a variety of different kinds. But we didn't camp. We stayed in lodging. We stayed in a couple of Airbnbs. We stayed in this lovely, completely unpretentious house that this guy, Dan, owned. And as you can tell from the sign, it's, it was unpretentious. So he has just a small little house with 2 bedrooms, and he rents out both the bedrooms, and then he sleeps somewhere else, and he provides breakfast, and it was really nice. And he's a wealth of information. In fact, he met us on the trail and biked with us part of the time. So he was a great guy to talk to. So we stayed in stuff like that. We stayed in the Frostburg Inn, which was also very simple rooms. Those didn't have breakfast though. And then the lock houses were fun. We only got to stay in 2 because we missed the one, but they were really fun. And so if you get a small group together, you can rent those. They have, we had 5 of us. You could have more. I think there was room for maybe 8 in some of them. And they're all furnished with, they have a pick a period and they furnish it to that period. So they're quite nicely done. I highly recommend them if you have a group. But you do have to bring your own bedding. So that's why we had to bring sleeping bags or something. A last minute add to our lodging was the Quality Inn, because we skipped that other place. We needed another hotel, and that actually ended up being really fun because it was right on the Appalachian Trail. So not only did we have C&O bikers to talk to, but there were through hikers for the Appalachian Trail that were staying at that hotel. So that was really interesting to run into all those people. Kitchens turned out to be not very important. We had gotten Airbnbs with kitchens, and a lot of houses have kitchens, but it turns out the trails are really well set up for restaurant eating. They're not super set up for grocery shopping. And more about eating. So here's, so on the day we were in the lock house, David and I rode to go get groceries. See, the groceries were not convenient. You had to ride up the hill again and over a few miles to get to town to buy some groceries. And then we came back, and then these wonderful cooks were navigating how to work the stove or something. I don't know what. And cooked us dinner. So we had a lovely dinner. That was the only time we actually cooked our own dinner on the whole trip. But it was very nice. That's in a lock house. Notice all the bikes around the edges. We had lots of other great restaurants. This is one of our favorites. This was a really fun one too. A lot of places, a lot of cute towns. This one had a bike store or bike shop right next to a bakery. How sweet is that? And then I was really excited. One day I got a cherry pie and strapped it to my pannier and carried that around. So
Ruth, if I could just add,
Yes.
I just,
do you want us to come up here and say it?
well, I mean, if you want me to, but just that, so we had this meal that, Ruth and David went to get.
I think you should talk here so they can hear.
So it was after a full day of biking, and the grocery store was straight up the hill, like not close. And we were tired, and David and Ruth volunteered to go, and I thought, geez, maybe I should go, but anyway, it was like they were heroes to go up the hill, and then brought back all this they brought back wine and bananas and all this good food. It was like a huge plus, and especially for us tired folks that stayed behind and were slugs. No, I speak for myself. Yeah, but anyway, thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luke. That was a great story. All right. So yeah. So let's see. I'm talking about other meals we did. One day we knew we weren't going to be necessarily near anything during lunchtime, so we bought sandwiches early and carried them all day and had lunch by a little picnic table right by a cliff with little trickles of water. It was just beautiful and lovely. Turns out a lot of these are little towns, and yet 2 of us were vegetarians on the trip, and they were very vegetarian friendly, even the littlest towns, which is a little bit different than Minnesota, I think. I found that very refreshing and surprising. And the food options were great in these little towns. When you're on the C&O part of the trail, you do need more planning for food. It's a lot easier on the Gap. There's towns kind of speckled about as often as you need them to give you, lunch and dinner and everything. But on the C&O, we had a little more trouble. So in Paw Paw, where we stayed with our friend Dan, there was only one place you could get food. There was no grocery store, and the only place to get dinner was a pizza at the gas station. So that's it. No other choices. So very limited, but still very good. Twice on the trip, we had to get our breakfast at 7-Eleven, which feeds you, but there's nothing really great to find at 7-Eleven. No offense to 7-Eleven. And you especially have to plan with the lock houses because you need dinner and breakfast. So you need to go to town and get your bananas and everything the night before. All right. And this one meal, so we were out, the last day of our trip was Memorial Day. This was Memorial Day. And we kind of didn't realize that small towns would all close up for Memorial Day. So all the restaurants were closed, but we got really lucky and found a food truck right on the trail and this lovely view of the river that we could sit and eat our food at. And in fact, that same evening, so I haven't talked about the different routes we all did the last day. So on the last day, we all did kind of different stuff. I won't go into all the reasons, but anyway, David and Julie ended up biking all the way to Pittsburgh. Venky and I biked halfway to Pittsburgh and back, and that's where we were here. And then we found another food truck the same day on the way back. I'll go over that a little more when I get to the map again. Okay. So friends, we found some, you meet people on the trail. It's really nice, even though the weather had been so bad. I think there was probably fewer people on the trail than normal, but we still met some good friends. This couple on the left, we saw them many times. The first time we saw them, they had a trailer with 2 little kids in it. And then I think another time we saw them, the kids were on little tiny bikes and the people were walking. And then this time we found them without the kids and just the adults were biking, and they had an au pair with them who, would babysit the kids. So they did every mode of transportation on the trail that they could with their kids. The other two were Deb and Heather, and we met them on the very first morning at breakfast, and then we kept seeing them over and over again. We'd run into them in town. We'd, happen to go into a cafe, and there they were. And so we ran into them many, many times, made good friends. And another group we saw on the trail was a group of, 5 or 6, 20-year-olds that had a lot of enthusiasm and definitely not a lot of gear. So they had They had like plastic garbage bags full of stuff strapped to their bikes everywhere they could. But they were having fun. They were having a really good time. So that was kind of nice. All right, getting your ducks in a row. So this is something I learned on the trip. So we kept hearing that things were going to cross a bridge or we were going to cross a viaduct. And then at one point, we're going to cross an aqueduct. It's like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference between these things? So I Googled viaduct because isn't that just a bridge? And found out that it is a bridge with evenly spaced supports that are identical. That's kind of the definition I heard. So that's a viaduct. But then we get to this spot and the sign tells us that this is a viaduct and this is an aqueduct that we just biked across. And I'm like, okay, they kind of look the same. So what's the deal with that? And here's another view of the one we had just biked across. Okay, and then the viaduct. Here's the aqueduct. We're like, okay, what's the difference? And then I finally saw this sign that kind of made it all make sense to me. So on the sign, you can see that the aqueduct really did hold water. That was actually the route that the boats took to get across over this other creek. So the viaduct was for trains, and the aqueduct actually that we just biked on actually held water. So that all finally made sense to me. All right, so we did finally get to the end of the trail. This is mile 0. And in order to get there, it's in Georgetown, right by Washington, D.C. And it's hard to get there. Like you have to pay attention to the signs and like you weave in and around in places and you kind of feel like you're trespassing on property in order to get there. But we did finally find it and take a picture. And then we wanted to take a picture of all of us with the sign. But somebody held their phone right where it says mile 0. So someone ruined the photo. I won't name any names or not, but there we are. Finally finished. Okay. And here's us at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. We actually ended up spending 2 days or 2 partial days in D.C. So we got to bike around the memorials. The next day we took a trip to Old Alexandria and had lunch there. That was a nice bike ride and had a good time. And I'll just point out what we actually did after Washington, D.C. So Luke ended up adding to our group late enough that he couldn't get a bike slot on the train. So Luke ended up parking in Washington, D.C. The rest of us parked in Connellsville. So when we got to D.C., Luke was done and ready to go. The other 4 of us took the train back to Connellsville and stayed a night. And then in order to summer all of this portion, David and Julie ended up biking all the way to Pittsburgh, staying a night, and then one of them has to train back down to Connellsville because their car's in Connellsville. So we thought Venky and I decided that was too complicated. So we just stayed in Connellsville, biked up to West Newton and back down again. So everyone did kind of different things there. So here's a little bit of info if you are interested in going. This is all my opinion. What kind of bike to ride? Well, it's definitely not good for skinny tired bikes. The trails are crushed rock. I had 1 1/4 inch tires and I thought they worked great. Other people had 1 1/2 inch tires and those worked really well too. So I would say you don't need like a mountain bike, but a hybrid or touring bike can be a good choice. If you should book your lodging early, especially if you want lock hoses. And you should definitely research where you're going to get food. The restaurants are quite available on the Gap, but not so available later. And everything might be closed on holidays. Grocery stores are rarely convenient to bikers. They're far away from these cute little towns out where people in cars can get to them. And 7-Eleven is not a great place to get a meal, but you will be fed. So we decided that maybe a better plan if you're going to do it, would be to start in West Newton Where's my cursor? Start here, actually drive to here, and then bike all the way down. And the reason, again, to start here instead of Pittsburgh is parking may be unsafe and also expensive in Pittsburgh. But, if you know somebody, then you can just park in Pittsburgh. But start in West Newton, bike all the way down to DC, then train back to Pittsburgh. And then the last day you just bike down to here and get your car. So that'd be just a partial bike. We also found that the shuttle that we took was quite reasonable. So if you want to consider shuttling anywhere instead of taking the train, that might be a good option, and especially good if you have a group, because the price for our group ended up being pretty similar to the train. So if you have a few people, that's a good option for you. All right, what else? So yeah, consider using shuttles instead of Amtrak, and it is more flexible. We did have, and possibly more timely, ours was 3 hours late. Our train was 3 hours late, so that was not fun. Buy the trail guide. I have one here. Well, you can't see it on that land, but anyway, buy the trail guide. It's a good source for, has a really good map and a good source for other stuff. And join the Facebook group, because you will get all kinds of good information even while you're riding the trail. Allow plenty of time to see things. It's beautiful, it's interesting. There's nature, history, and architecture. So lots of good stuff. And here's a summary of our trip. It shows our mileage for the day, and they varied a lot. So here's the one we climbed the most mileage. We did almost nothing on our layover day. We just tooled around town. We stayed in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, all over the place, and all kinds of different lodging. And there's a little summary of what we did. All right, and finally, thank you for listening. And here's a lodging we had where they provided nice terry bathrobes for us. So, does anyone have any questions for me?
Chat.
From the chat. We drove. So we drove in 3 cars. Some people saw relatives on the way, but yeah, we drove so we could bring our bikes. You could fly though, but we drove. Took a day and a half.
Was there any equipment you wished you brought along, or that you found you could have done with power?
Is there any even though it's in the chat, I'm gonna say it again. Is there any equipment we wish we had or wish we'd left behind? I don't recall anything that we wished we'd taken that we didn't take. There were some people who maybe thought they brought too much snacks, but because we were worried about food, we maybe to some extent people might have taken too many snacks. Do you guys have any more to add to that as far as equipment? Okay.
2 more questions from chat.
All right.
Do you think dehydrated meals would work well?
Would dehydrated meals work well? Well, if you were, yeah, you could do that if you, in a pinch, and certainly if you're camping, sure.
And did you try
a pawpaw? Did we try a pawpaw? No, so pawpaws were not ripe when we were there, and we did hear from our guy who lived in pawpaw that they only stay, like once they're ripe, they're only good for like, I don't know, 20 hours or something. Like they go bad really fast, so they can't even be transported to stores. So you have to get them right off the tree pretty much. But no, we didn't get to try any. They weren't ripe. All right, was there a question here? Did we have any problems with the bike on the Amtrak? No, they just kind of opened a car and we handed them up to them and they put them in. Yeah.
What's the cost?
What was the cost for the bike or for the Amtrak itself? Adding the bike, I think it was like $20 or something. Yeah, it wasn't a lot. Yeah.
Did you use an app or maps to guide you at all?
Did we use an app to guide us? No, you don't really need it. I mean, the trail's very well marked and we had a really good map. We had this one from the book. No, we didn't really need guiding other than when we went off the trail, and then we just used Google Maps or something, and it wasn't that much. So. Yeah.
Did you stop and eat in Georgetown?
Did we stop and eat in Georgetown? Well, you guys had a meal near Georgetown, right?
An Indian restaurant.
David and Julie and maybe others ate at an Indian restaurant of some type, yeah, but not me.
Did you take a train from here?
Can you take the train from here? I'm sure eventually you could get a route there. I don't know.
You know, let me take the train to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean,
You have to put your bike on the train here and then you wouldn't have to worry about parking, you know?
yeah, just might be a lot of time on the train.
You'd have to switch trains in Chicago and it was more feasible to drive.
Yeah. So you probably could, but it might take longer than we took. We took like a day and a half to get there. I mean, you could do it in one day, one really long day, but we didn't. All right. All right. Well, any other chat things? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ruth. So thank you for that wonderful presentation.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.